So she put me in touch with him, and he was very helpful in helping me figure out how one fills out an application with the Department of Interior. It's a very interesting endeavor. But he was very helpful, and so here I am. And some of your journeys. How long did you plan to come here? Or did you not plan to come here? And you were coming by and you said, wow, that place looks interesting. Let's check it out. But our journeys have brought us here. The journeys of the ancestral Puebloans, in about 550 AD, we believe brought them across the Bering Strait. And then they started a really long route to here, what we would call the scenic route. Maybe they came down the coast of California. They came all the way across Mexico. They came across Central America in some places. And then they finally turned up to come into Colorado. Why they took the scenic route, we're not quite sure. But nonetheless, their journey brought them here, where they were supposed to be. And when they first got here, they were hunter-gatherers, but on their journey here, someone had given them something, this thing called corn or maize or maíz. And they said, well, you're supposed to plant this. They didn't know anything about planting. They were hunter-gatherers. Wherever the game went, they went. And then they gathered berries and things and fruits along the way. So they looked for a place to farm. And of course, they picked here. Doesn't look like a great place to farm. Actually, there's some good reasons why they picked here. We are, contrary to popular belief, not really a mesa. A mesa is flat. We're a cuesta. The south side of us slopes down at about a 7-degree angle. And that makes us a cuesta, not a mesa. How is that beneficial to farming? That slope gives you a 20 to 30 day longer growing season than you get down in the valley. How they knew that without Poor Richard's Almanac or Google or something, I have no idea, but they figured it out. Highly intelligent, observant people, then and now. And so they realized, well, you know, we got a longer growing season up there. We're supposed to plant this corn stuff. And also, it tends to be a little windy up here. Some of you might have noticed if you're staying up top in the lodge. And that blows in lots of rich soil. So you've got richer soil than down in the valley. And you've got a longer growing season. But you're missing something. Water. See, there is none up here.
That's a problem.
The nearest river is the Mancos River, and that's 6 miles away, which is not going to help you a whole lot while you're doing your farming. So, they practiced dry farming, which, as I understand it, kind of results in waiting for it to rain or snow, pretty much. And of course, they had ceremonies and things like that that encouraged it to rain and snow. And it did rain and snow. And so they wisely watched the flow of the water, and they would set up something called check dams to direct the water out to where their fields were and their plants were. And they planted 3 things, corn, beans, and squash, in a very wise arrangement. They had the corn in the middle, they had the beans around it, they had the squash around that. Corn takes nitrogen out of the soil. Beans tends to help the soil either replenish or hold on to the nitrogen. And the squash is kind of a shield around, will give some shade to the younger plants as they're growing. Amazing how they figured these things out. Creative problem solvers, intelligent, observant people, then and now. So they planted up here, and everything was going pretty well. But they needed water to drink. So now you have another issue, right? Millions of years ago, this was an inland sea. And then eventually the tectonic plates began to lift up underneath one another and lift it up, and you ended up with valleys and canyons and things like that, and the water came and went until it kind of just went. And when you have a sea, when you have a beach, you get beach sand, and beach sand is porous. And when you harden beach sand over millions of years, you get sandstone. But there was also another rock here that was non-porous, shale, Menifee shale. So here's what happened. The moisture, snow or rain, falls on the top. It starts to seep down through the sandstone, and it continues to come down until it meets a harder, non-porous rock, being the shale, and then the water has to go somewhere. If we know anything about water, it's going to find a way out. And so it did. Often in the back of alcoves, you would just have water pouring out of the rock. Maybe the second time in history you got water from a rock. And so they obviously noticed this vast amount of water pouring out of places, and so they would dig troughs and kind of catch it and realize that it was perfectly safe to drink. It had just been siphoned through 300 or 400 feet of water. Kind of better than reverse osmosis. So that's their drinking water. We call it seep springs, where their drinking water was. And it was often inside an alcove. In this particular instance, the seep spring is close by down there somewhere, but like in Balcony House, you'll see the seep spring inside. In Longhouse, you'll see it in the back of the alcove. And so they would come down here to get their water. And I wonder who came down to get the water. Any ideas?
The women.
The women. You would be correct. They would come down using something called hand and toe holds. You'd chip out a little bit of the sandstone because it's pretty soft. Put your hand in there, chip out a little more, put the hand in there, and you could go up and down easily. Piece of cake, right? Carrying water to the tune of 8.3 pounds per gallon. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not just going to carry a gallon if I got to go up and down. Right? So you got to be pretty strong. They made baskets out of yucca cordage. They lined the inside of the basket with the sap from the pinyon pine tree to seal it, so now they could carry liquid. Nothing would spill out. They made a longer handle. They would put it across their forehead, and it would hang behind them, kind of like a precursor to the backpack idea. And we believe the women did this because if you press here on your forehead, press hard, you will feel the pressure right in the back of your neck. And in the female remains that we discovered significant osteoarthritic damage to the base of the neck on the females. So that led us to that conclusion. Later on, once they learned how to build pottery, then it gets even better. They put this little round doohickey on the top of their head, and then they would carry the pots full of water on their head. Talk about balance.
Wow.
Better than a gymnast, right? So they would come down and get the water. And eventually somebody said, gee, now that we know how to build pueblos above ground and we don't have to dig down, maybe we should leave a little closer to the water supply. You know, it's just a thought. The alcoves were here already. Many of the stones were already in the alcoves. But how do you get them into bricks? Like you see. You take a harder stone and you score them. You go back and forth until you make a really deep kind of indentation. And then with your stone hammer, you smack it and it'll split. The mortar that they used here is the same mortar that they used to build pit houses. And so they would use sand, clay, ash, and water. And I think a special ingredient because we're not quite sure why their mortar lasts so much longer than ours does. Colleges have studied this, haven't come up with definite answers yet. So taking a look at what's been created, 150 rooms, 21 kivas. And you'll look and see they were very intelligent. They worked with the land instead of against it. See the big boulders? They didn't try to move those, they used them. They were already there. And see how they have all sorts of different sizes and shapes, and most of these would have gone up to the ceiling like that first column. See that first kind of tower there? That's going to be 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 stories high. And every time you see the wood sticking out, that's the floor of the top story and the roof of the next story. They only had tools made out of stone, bone, and wood. No beast of burden, so whatever needed to be carried, they needed to carry. But they worked together in community and built this. and others. We have 600 different cliff sites within this park. They're not all this large because not all the alcoves are this large. You can't really create an alcove, you kind of got to work with whatever size you got. This one was, of course, particularly large, and so it lent itself to that. Looking up here at this tower, you see the pinkish kind of stuff, and then in the room that's kind of open, so we get to see the inside. That pinkish kind of stuff is plaster. They plastered the inside and the outside. Why do we paint our living rooms?
Make it look pretty.
Make it look pretty, makes it look nice, makes us feel good. Same thing. They weren't so different than us. They were thriving. They weren't just surviving. If they were just surviving, they wouldn't have had time to worry about plastering anything. But they plastered the inside and the outside. And this is the color of the plaster that we're seeing now. They knew how to use dyes from the different plants. So what if this was colorful? What if we had a myriad of colors there? How beautiful. How inviting. What a wonderful place to want to be. Let's see how I'm doing. Yeah.
So the tall tower here is the only one left. Did it extend all the way across? There's a big wall.
No, that would have been there. You would have had all of these buildings. You got 151 rooms. Every time we think of a room, we think of 5 by 10, you know? But that's not exactly how it worked with them because, to be honest, they didn't need to have his rooms quite as big because they were, in my humble opinion, just the right size. Women were about 5 feet to 5'2", men were about 5'2" to 5'4". So, they would have some towers that went all the way up, others that are a little shorter. A lot of times they would have ladders on top so they could get from one to the other. And see on the very, very top, that whole long area up there, that was more than likely used for storage. Let's go down and take a closer look.